For anyone who's on already, we're going to wait about a minute or a minute and a half, and then we'll get started. Hey, Renee. Hey, Danielle. We're just going to wait another minute, and then we'll get started.
Sounds good. Hi. And hi, Eileen.
Hi.
That sounded strange, but I think I heard the hi. Hi, Danielle. Yeah, she's frozen, at least to me.
There we go. Is that better?
It is
Yeah.
better.
Yeah, I have to have two different Wi-Fis, one upstairs and one downstairs. And I was working upstairs and I forgot to switch it when I walked downstairs. So here we are.
That definitely makes a difference.
Right? I know. You'd think with Spectrum, I wouldn't have to do that. My house isn't that big, but
Yeah. Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Yeah, welcome everyone. My name is Mark Weicker. I'm with Abdenauer Weicker, and this is the free special education legal clinic. It's a monthly workshop we put on together in a collaboration with Disability Rights Ohio and the Ohio Coalition for the Education of Children with Disabilities. And today, our topic is it's part of the transition series, post-secondary transition series. This is the third workshop in the series. And today's workshop is preparing for employment, vocational rehabilitation services for transition age youth. And the presentation today is going to be put on by Eileen Brock with Disability Rights Ohio. And a couple things before we get started. You, of course, can register for this workshop like you probably already have, and other workshops at www.lawyersforstudents.com/legal clinic. That's where the series of workshops is located. You can also sign up for individual guidance sessions, and those sessions are 30-minute private sessions with an advocate and/or attorney. And those are immediately following the workshops. We hold those for, again, a half hour at a time, following the workshop. So everything that we do in this series, at least, is done on the third Monday of the month. And I think that covers it. There are also resources available at the same link. So resources for special education parents and educators. We've provided a whole host of resources from all three organizations. And we also have all of the prior workshops recorded at the same link. So if you missed one or you hadn't been able to make it, you can always go back and watch that. It's posted up to YouTube. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Eileen Brock, who's going to do today's workshop. Hi, Eileen.
Hi, Mark. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. Let me just start my PowerPoint here. Here we go. So as Mark mentioned, today's presentation is preparing for employment, vocational rehabilitation services for transition age youth. I'm Eileen Brock. I'm an attorney at Disability Rights Ohio, and I'm also the Client Assistance Program Coordinator here at DRO. So today's session, we'll kind of focus on four topics: vocational rehabilitation or VR services, just generally, and then also some services that are available specifically for transition age youth, how to apply for VR services, and then how the client assistance program here at DRO can help assist in providing additional information or advocacy related to VR services.
Hey, Eileen, I'm sorry to jump in here real
Yeah.
quick. I forgot to mention something and somebody has their
Sure.
hand up. And I'll start first by saying, if you do have questions, you can drop those in the Q&A and we'll try to feed those throughout the course of the presentation if it fits, or we'll hold some to the end if they don't fit. But yeah, you can drop those in the Q&A. If you have any trouble with that, you can put them in the chat too, but we prefer if you put them in the Q&A to start. And then I don't know if this is on purpose or not, but it looks like someone by the name of Ray has her hand up. So I will, Ray, if you can type your question in the Q&A, that would be beneficial. All right.
Great. I'm happy. Yeah, and happy to take questions throughout. If someone could just monitor the chat and the Q&A for me, because I don't think I'll see those necessarily pop up right away. So first, what are vocational rehabilitation services? So VR services are intended to help individuals with disabilities prepare for, find, and maintain and advance in competitive integrated employment. And so by competitive integrated employment, we mean employment that pays at least minimum wage. And by integrated, we mean employment where there are also people without disabilities doing the same jobs. These are services that are available in Ohio, and I believe every state in the nation, starting at age 14. They are highly individualized, much like the special education services your child might be receiving at this point, and they're based on the needs and goals of each individual. But some common services that many people receive in one form or another is assessment, career exploration, training, which can be things like college, like financial support for college, occupational training, which might be something like getting a CDL, computer skills training, like a typing class, if that's something an individual needs to work on. These services also include job development, in which by that we mean, excuse me, like resume building, job searching, assistance with interviewing, practicing or even attending an interview with somebody if that's something an individual needs. Job coaching or on-the-job supports, having someone there on the job to kind of help the individual learn the job and kind of fade those supports over time. Assistive technology, and ultimately VR services can be anything an individual needs in order to achieve their job goal. So to receive VR services, you first need to apply for services. In Ohio, our VR agency is Opportunities for Ohioans with Disabilities, or OOD for short. To apply, you can contact your local office. I put that address here, or you can just go on their website, ood.ohio.gov. If by contacting the local office, you can let them know, I want to apply for myself or apply for my child. Can you help me fill out the application on the phone? They can schedule an appointment for you to come in and fill it out. They can mail you an application, whatever works best for you. Or if you prefer, they have recently started accepting kind of online applications through this online portal, OOD Works. So if you prefer, you can apply for services for you or for your child here online. And just because I think most of the participants in this workshop are going to be parents of students with disabilities, you will be required to sign that application for your young person. They can't, if they're under 18, they cannot apply just on their own. So in order to start receiving VR services, you also have to be eligible for those services. And there are 4 kind of eligibility criteria in place. First, the individual has to have a disability. That disability has to make it hard for them to get or keep a job. And they must require OOD services in order to get or keep a job that is right for them. And they have to be able to benefit from services. And I think the first 3 are pretty self-explanatory. I think sometimes where some hiccups come up is at the end, number 4 there, if they could benefit from OOD's services. I've certainly had experiences talking to individuals where OOD has told someone that their child's disability is too severe for them to benefit from the services. And in those cases, OOD actually has an obligation to provide what are called trial work experiences in order to show by clear and convincing evidence, which is a pretty heavy burden, that the individual cannot work. So, most people who are applying for services likely should be able to meet this eligibility criteria. And if they don't, there's an appeals process for that in place as well. So just kind of more on the services process generally. So we discussed, you know, application, how to apply. We discussed eligibility. After someone's been found eligible, this is kind of where the actual meat and potatoes of the services come in place, which is the development of the individualized plan for employment, or the IPE. So the IPE, much like the IEP, is a written plan that will contain a job goal, some sort of employment outcome that can be, you know, teacher, lawyer, doctor, hostess, whatever it is that the individual wants to do and that OOD is willing to agree to support. And then also the services that the individual needs in order to achieve that job goal. So that could be the services I mentioned earlier, you know, job development, job coaching, if someone needs assessments or they need assistive technology, whatever it is that they need, that should be written on that plan. And also on the plan should be who is going to provide those services. And OOD would provide kind of a list of vendors that individuals have to choose from to provide those services. After the individualized plan for employment is developed, then it's kind of the actual process, the delivery of the services that are listed in the plan. And this can take, you know, a couple months to many years, depending on what the employment outcome is. If someone's going to require, you know, an advanced degree, like go to medical school or law school, obviously that plan is going to take much longer to be fulfilled, to get those services delivered. But maybe someone's just looking for a shorter term job, and that's something that they can be placed in within a couple months. So it really depends, again, on the individual needs of the person and their job goal. After the services are delivered, ideally, the individual will be in stable employment. And so by that, OOD is usually looking for about 90 days of stable employment without any issues. And at that point, the case would be closed as successfully rehabilitated. Now I want to talk a little bit about services specifically for transition age youth. So that process that I just mentioned, all those services I just mentioned, those are available to everybody starting at age 14. And it's kind of a process between the individual or their parent and OOD about what those services will look like and what the process, you know, the timeline for the process. But there are also specifically services just for students 14 to 22 that are available in addition to, and I say in addition to because they're not instead of the other services, but they're in addition to the services that I just mentioned, just for young people who may be still in high school or beginning of college and need some additional help. So those three services that are available specifically for transition age youth include pre-employment transition services, or PREETs, summer youth work experiences, and then non-permanent job development. So pre-employment transition services, or PREETs, are some of those very first vocational rehabilitation services. This is for, you know, the 14, 15-year-old who maybe has never really thought about working, doesn't really know what they want to do, but maybe is interested in working in the future, or thinks they're interested in working in the future. And so it just kind of helps the student get a general understanding about, you know, what does it mean to work? What is work like? What are some of your career interests, or just your interests generally, and how could those be, you know, how could you make a career out of that, or what are some careers that might be a good fit for you based on your interests? These services are delivered in a lot of different places. Sometimes OOD will partner with schools, and they're actually provided in the schools, or sometimes with community partners out in the community. These are typically provided in small groups because they're kind of less individualized, since these are the very first services someone's receiving, and they're just kind of a high-level overview of working. But they can be offered one-on-one if that's what an individual needs. They can be offered, you know, in person, in the community somewhere at school, like I mentioned, or I've also seen them offered virtually for individuals. There are 5 core pre-ET services. That's counseling on post-secondary options. This is going to be information for the young person about what are your post-secondary options, you know, college, what does that, you know, what do you have to do to get into college? What does that look like? What are some other training options? Maybe you want to go into an apprenticeship, things like that. Any sort of like additional education would be covered in that module. Then we have job exploration counseling. That's exactly what it sounds like. Kind of further exploring interests. What are jobs out there? What does the labor market look like for those jobs? And then we get into instruction and self-advocacy, which I think is another self-explanatory or well-titled one. This is going to be more so self-advocacy related to work. So it might be kind of thinking about, how would I disclose my disability at work? Should I disclose my disability? How would I ask for reasonable accommodation? Things like that. Then there's work-based learning and then workplace readiness training. And these are what they sound like, more based actually on work. Work-based learning typically takes place at an actual work site, and it's kind of an opportunity to shadow, see a workplace in action, and can kind of get more of that hands-on experience. And workplace readiness is more about thinking about, okay, what kinds of skills do I need to be successful at work? Whether those are kind of interpersonal skills or other skills that just kind of everybody needs to be successful in the workplace. So after pre-employment transition services, and I just want to clarify, there's no requirement that everyone do all of these services or do these services in this order, but this is kind of a typical trajectory from what I've seen based on my experience. So those pre-ed services are those very first services for kind of those younger consumers who are just becoming eligible for VR services. Summer youth work experiences are kind of the next step up. These are paid summer work experiences that kind of help students obtain competitive work skills and actually prepare them to work in the community. They, as it sounds like, they occur over the summer. It's 20 hours a week for 5 weeks. There's usually 2 sessions offered every summer. OOD hosts them at various work sites. The work sites will range a lot depending on what region of the state you live in, but I've seen them at grocery stores, kind of like big box stores like Rural King. I've seen the zoo, Goodwill, pet stores, but it kind of depends on who's willing to participate as a site each year. Yes.
We do have 2 questions.
Sure.
Up, if you wouldn't mind taking a second. Okay, Ray asks, do pre-ETS need to be in a specific order? Like, do soft skills fit into any of that order?
They don't need to be in a specific order, and it's kind of a discussion between the individual and the parent and the VR counselor about, does it make sense for the student to do all of them? Do they just need to do some of them? So no, it doesn't have to go in any specific order. And then I think the second question was about soft skills,
Right.
which, yes, soft skills are kind of covered. Get back here if I can. In that workplace readiness training, kind of that socialization or interacting with peers, I think that's where you're most likely to see some of those soft skills covered that you might need for employment.
Okay, and then secondly, Kelly says multiple times she was told OOD would not be able to provide services or a job coach for someone who needs assistance with toileting. Is that correct?
So no, I would say no. Because again, if someone's been found eligible for services, that means that they can benefit from the services. And so, there could be supports in place for the individual's disability. It might be that you may be required to kind of provide those supports. So if you have a personal care assistance for your child or something like that, but that should not be prohibiting them from participating in services. I have my contact information at the end. So if you want to kind of get in contact with me and talk more about your experience, I'm happy to do that and see if we can troubleshoot about what's going on.
Okay, thank you so much.
Absolutely. So back to summer youth work experiences. I think I mentioned these kind of various work sites that OOD hosts these at. These are typically, again, offered in small groups, maybe like a 5-to-1 ratio. Kind of other individuals who are interested in the same job site. And there'll be a job coach, that adult support there, kind of helping the students learn the job, the different tasks, providing support as needed, redirection, all of that. But again, if someone needs this to be provided one-on-one because of their disability, that is something that OOD should be able to accommodate. Lastly, we have non-permanent job development. And so this is what I think as the kind of last step of the transition services that are available from OOD for youth. So this is a service that's intended to help students obtain exactly what it sounds like, non-permanent work. So this is not going to be their forever job, but this is, you know, seasonal work, an after-school job, maybe a part-time job while they're in college, or in the school year in high school even, that just kind of helps them get that extra work experience and build that work history. It really, you know, can be any sort of job that's appropriate for them, that's agreed upon by OOD and the individual. And job coaching and other services can be provided in order to help a young person find this kind of non-permanent job. And then I just wanted to include one slide here about youth participating in these services. I talk to a lot of families, and sometimes families will say, well, you know, those are services for later. I'll worry about that when my child graduates high school or when they're in college. And so I would just really encourage families to think about participating in these services earlier. They're available starting at age 14, and they really are part of the entire transition planning process that should be happening in your child's life at this point. These are services that can be coordinated with the transition services that are listed on the student's IEP. And so, you know, if there's some sort of employment outcome on the, you know, section 5 of the IEP, maybe some of these OOD services can be written in there to kind of coordinate with those services. And I think the biggest factor in starting earlier is that research really shows that early engagement leads to better outcomes. So these students who are engaging in these services while they're still in high school really have a better long-term success rate. I think the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition has a statistic that students who had a job at the time of their exit from school are 5.1 times more likely to remain employed in the future. And then they have this other statistic that students who had 2 or more authentic paid work experiences, so like those summer youth work experiences, and or received assistance from 3 to 6 community-based agencies while in school, were more likely to become employed and or continue in their education. So the studies really show that you know, young people who are engaging in these services really do benefit in the long term. Lastly, I just want to talk a little bit about our client assistance program here at Disability Rights Ohio. So through our client assistance program, we are able to advocate for and protect the rights of individuals with disabilities who are applying for or receiving these VR services. So we're able to provide things like individual legal representation, advocacy, information and referral, outreach, education, like this training today. And so if you have questions, concerns, need more specific information now or in the future about VR services, that's something that we can help with. And so, you know, we can provide those services. And I've listed some things that we'll commonly advocate, you know, for resolution to. You know, if someone's been turned down for VR services, you know, said, you know, you're not eligible, for example, like the question mentioned earlier in the presentation, or you have concerns about the counselor, maybe it's not a good personality fit, you're just not satisfied with the services that you or your child is receiving. Maybe OOD decided to close the case and you're not in agreement with that. Or if there are just any other sort of problems with VR services, that's something that the client assistance program is able to help with.
Hi,
And
Eileen.
to contact, yes.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry,
Sorry to interrupt. There's another question.
Sure.
It might be to the previous slide, but
Okay.
Ray was wondering how we can kind of incorporate these conversations into an IEP team meeting. If we can.
Yes, I think that's a great question. And so after your child is linked with OOD, I think your OOD counselor, your child's OOD counselor, should absolutely be coming to those annual IEP reviews or whenever the transition planning is kind of reviewed to see, you know, how can they partner on those services and make sure that what they're doing aligns with whatever transition services the school district is providing. And this doesn't seem to happen a lot in practice, but OOD services can actually, you know, OOD can be responsible for some of the services written in the IEP. That's actually something that can happen. So that's why that coordination is so important. So I think inviting them to those IEP meetings is kind of the first step, and asking them to educate the IEP team if they're not familiar with OOD services, about what the services look like, what they can provide, and then how they can partner, because those teams should absolutely be working together.
Thank you.
Yes. And here's our contact information. It's just the Disability Rights Ohio general contact information. That's how you can contact the Client Assistance Program as well. So we have an intake phone number that can be called during the week, or you can fill out our online intake form to get in contact with us. And then I think that's all I have for today. We have time for any additional questions if there are anything or thoughts. And then I've also included my own contact information here in case you want to get in contact with me after today's presentation about anything specific.
Thank you very much, Eileen. And yeah, we'll take a few minutes to see if there are any questions related to this or anything else special education related. Here is one question. What happens if they both wait on the other to offer or provide services and the student is stuck in limbo waiting on them to wait on each other?
I think that's a good question. I would say with the school, right, they have those affirmative obligations to provide a free, appropriate public education. There's recourse there. If they're not providing the transition services, they're ultimately responsible. That's, you know, an entitlement, and OOD services are not an entitlement in the same way. So I think the school district should really be taking the first stab if you're in that situation. But I think calling a meeting and inviting both of them and saying, you know, hey, what's the plan? What are we going to do about this? Would be best. And I would say that the services that the school offers and OOD offers may not always look the same. So that's why I think it's both that it's good that both are part of the planning process, talking about services that they can provide, because they might not look the same. And I think students generally need to receive services from both in order for it to make it the most meaningful. So I would say, you know, request a meeting with everybody, invite everybody and talk about it. The OOD counselor is not responsive, ask for their supervisor to attend. You know, if you're having troubles with your IEP team, you can contact any of the organizations that sponsor this webinar series, but, you know, reach out to that special education director or coordinator who's responsible, and just get everyone to the table to talk about what's going on.
All right, next question, DRO specific. Does DRO have staff who are familiar with the deaf communities or know how to sign if deaf clients are being referred to DRO?
We currently don't have any deaf staff, but we do use an interpretation service if someone contacts us who needs that service. So you can contact, you know, whether you fill out the online intake form or call in using the relay, however it is that you prefer to communicate, we will accommodate and we'll find a way.
Excellent, thank you. And we'll give it another couple minutes here, but I also just wanted to mention that our next, I'm trying to pull up the next workshop here. Looks like the next one, of course, it's going to be the third Monday of December. That's December 18th. And that's going to be preparing for college and post-secondary training and education by AW. So it'll be conducted by our firm. And then we continue on through April. So, you know, I guess counting next month, there will be 5 more workshops in the post-secondary transition series. And those are all, again, available by the link, which is in the chat box at lawyersforstudents.com/legal clinic. And you can also sign up for individual guidance sessions there, 30-minute sessions. And we do have some open for next month and the following month for anyone who wants to sign up. And we typically do those with an attorney and advocate present. So they can be helpful if you need any specific advice. But barring any more questions, I think we'll wrap it up. Eileen, thank you very much for the information.
Absolutely.
And yeah, I hope everyone has a good week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Bye-bye.